Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Shri Vallabhadhi Ki Jai. Shri Govardhanaji Ki Jai. Jai Shri Krishna. Today is the 20th day of the reading of the Chaurasi Vaishnava Varta, the stories of the 84 Vaishnavas of Sri Mahaprabhuji Sri Vallabhacharya Ji. Varta 6, Part 2, or Section 2, the story of Gopal Das, son of Seth Purushottam Das. Bhav Prakash, the inner meaning. In the eternal Leela, Seth Purushottam Das is Sri Swaminiji's Sakhi, Indulekha, and Gopal Das is her Sakhi, Gayan Kala. He always sang the most poignant songs in the mood of separation of the gopis from Sri Krishna. In fact, he himself was always steeped in that sad mood. Part 1. Gopal Das was very close to the family Sri Thakurji, Sri Madan Mohanji. Whatever he wanted, he asked for directly. He always graced Gopal Das in this way. Gopal Das loved to sing to the Lord. One day during the festival of Holi, Gopal Das began to suffer pangs of separation from the Lord. He forgot all about the mood of the holy season, that of union and love. In the same way as the gopis always sang in their Venugit and Yugal Git, songs of the flute and songs in pairs of verses. He sang two compositions in the gopis' loving mood. He sang in exactly the same mood as the gopis of Vraja. Hearing these songs, Sri Thakurji granted Gopal Das his direct sight, together with all his pastimes and entourage. Gopal Das bowed low and surrendered to all of them while singing, "Your servant Gopal Das surrenders to Sri Krishna, the enchanter, even of Cupid." Part 2. Quite some time later, Gopal Das's body became feeble with old age. Then he used to always repeat the Lord's name, and to grace him, Sri Thakurji would say, "Aha," after each name that he recited. One night, Gopal Das fell asleep whilst doing so, but then suddenly woke up and, missing his Sri Thakurji, called out to him, "O Madan Mohanji." From Madan Mohanji's temple came the voice, "Why are you calling me? I am right here next to you." Gopal Das asked his Sri Thakurji why he was still awake in the middle of the night and said he was sorry, but he had just had that habit of calling out to him. Sri Madan Mohanji said, "I really cannot bear your terrible pain of separation from me. I just had to come and comfort you." At night time, Gopal Das would lock up the Lord's temple abode, rest his head upon the step, cover himself with just a bit of cloth, and pass the night in the mood of separation. He paid no heed to the comforts of his body. He sang many songs of separation. Gopal Das avidly studied Sri Acharyaji's Subodhini and Nibandha, along with Sri Gosaiji's compositions about Sri Thakurji's inner Leela. He was always ready at the right time to serve the Lord. He had no concern for worldly business or societal and scriptural considerations, and simply remained absorbed in contemplating the Lord's pastimes. Sri Gosaiji loved Gopal Das very much. He would say, "A family should be like Sethji's family, always wrapped up in remembering the Lord in an indescribable mood of separation. So there is no need to tell every event in Gopal Das's life. He is part of Sethji's family. Up till now, 12 Vaishnava stories have been told, but by grouping them into families, this becomes the 6th story. Thus concludes Varta 6, Section 2, the story of Gopal Das. Now we're commencing Varta number 7, the story of Ram Das, a Saraswat Brahmin who lived to the east. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, Ram Das is the Sakhi of Radha Sahachari, literally the one who walks with Radha, and his name is Prema Manjari, one of the Kumarika gopis. Ram Das's father was very wealthy, but he did not have a son. Therefore he worshipped the sun god Surya, who eventually granted his wish. Ram Das was only 8 years old when his father arranged his marriage. Then the father died. Ram Das met and associated with a Vaishnava who followed a devotional path, but within lawful limitations. The Vaishnava invited him to accompany him on trip to a holy place, but Ram Das said that would not be appropriate because his father had only just died and he should be at home. The Vaishnava said, "All right then, but the Ganga Sagar is quite near your home, so why don't you bathe there? Go and bathe there." "I will come with you." They went to Ganga Sagar and stayed there for 3 days. On the 4th day after bathing, Ram Das was moving some sand before lighting up their cooking fire, and a small deity of child Krishna emerged from that sand. He bathed the deity with some water from the river, and then went and told his companion about it. The Vaishnava told him he was really lucky, and that he should now worship the deity, but then asked him, "But do you have a guru?" Ramdas was only 16, so he did not. The Vaishnava said, I will make you my disciple if you like. But Ramdas said he would only do this after going home, so that he could be initiated along with his wife. Then the Vaishnava told him that Sri Vallabhacharya-ji, who had defeated so many impersonalists in the south, and and in Varanasi, was currently in Purushottam Puri or Jagannath Puri, and that it would be the greatest privilege if he were to be initiated by him. Hearing this, Ramdas rushed home, taking the deity with him. The other, lawfully inclined Vaishnava, stayed at Gangasagar. Ramdas arrived in the afternoon in the small garden named Chauti Majali, just outside his village, and Sri Mahaprabhuji had left Purushottam Puri the day before and had arrived in that same garden and made camp. Sri Acharyaji asked Ramdas, what kind of form of the Lord did you find in the sand at Gangasagar? Please show him to me, Ramdas. Ramdas was most surprised that Sri Acharyaji knew his name and the whole story especially, since he had told no one about the little deity. He reasoned that Sri Acharyaji must be a very accomplished person, and asked some of the Vaishnavas there what his name was. Krishnadas Megan was there and told him that his name was Sri Vallabhacharya-ji, and that he was quite famous for defeating the impersonalists and establishing the path of pure devotion. Ramdas protested before Sri Acharyaji and begged him to come to his house. Sri Acharyaji said, you are a Saraswat Brahmin, but you eat and share water with Kshatriyas, so how will you ever lose this habit? Ramdas replied, by your grace I have quite a lot of wealth. I will now be very careful to follow all the rules regarding the maintenance of purity as regards the water in my home. I will obey your every instruction. Sri Acharyaji was pleased by this and visited his home. He initiated both Ramdas and his wife with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh. He then bathed Ramdas's Sri Thakurji with the 5 nectars and settled him onto a throne. This Sri Thakurji was known thereafter as Sri Navaneet Priyaji. Sri Acharyaji stayed for 5 days and nights in Ramdas's home and taught him everything about performing Seva to the Lord. Then he left to continue his holy grace pilgrimage. Part 1. From that day on, Ramdas performed his Seva, strictly adhering to the rules of cleanliness, and stayed in a pure state all the time, body, mind and heart. Bhav Prakash. He never spoke about worldly things or did business deals. He even gave up his intimate relationship with his wife. Part 1 continued. At first there was a lot of wealth and goods to use in the nice Seva that Ramdas was performing, but it depleted after not too long. Bhav Prakash. Ramdas still retained some pride about his wealth. Sri Thakurji wanted Ramdas to be rid of this and have total humility, and thus no other shelter other than he himself, so the wealth was made to dwindle. Part 1 continued. Ramdas thought to himself, I must do something about my financial state. In an easterly province lived some weavers called Tantin. Ramdas lent them some money and began to earn interest on it, which made him quite happy. Sri Thakurji said to him, have you put these weavers above me? Bhav Prakash. Sri Thakurji said, I only need love. First you put your heart into the wealth. When that went, you put it into the interest. So now you are making my seva with money earned from interest, and that is the worst kind of money. So how can I remain here? Part 1 continued. When Ramdas ji heard this, he was shocked. He was shocked into realizing his mistakes. He thought, nothing can happen without Sri Thakurji's wish, but I will not make the same mistake again. Part 1 continued. Ramdas ji went to the weavers and demanded all his money back. They objected that they had been paying him the interest, so why did he want the lump sum back? They hadn't had it for that long. Ramdas ji said, I need it for some work. I have to do with my lad. I have to do whatever he says. Bhav Prakash. In saying this, Ramdas ji meant that his divine child was quite contrary. He seats some of his toys high up, some low down, and others he breaks and throws down. The Lord is capable of anything. He can do, not do, or do otherwise, and does exactly as he sees fit. The weavers, on the other hand, just thought he was talking about some child. Part 1 continued. The Tantins returned Ramdas's money. He brought it home and went into Seva. After a few days, the money again dwindled. Ramdas's attachment to the money was broken, but the seed of pride still needed to be removed. Ramdas next went to a businessman and borrowed some money, putting himself into debt. That businessman cheated him, so he went to another and got into debt there as well. One day that businessman became very insistent and told Ramdas to pay him back in full. Ramdas had to listen to some harsh words, and he became quite ashamed of himself and despaired. Bhav Prakash, Ramdas's pride, was finally dashed. But Sri Thakurji could not tolerate Ramdas's sadness, so he disguised himself as Ramdas and went to the moneylender, paid him back in full, even adding in an extra 100 rupees and signing in Ramdas's name. Bhav Prakash. Sri Thakurji paid back the loan with the thought that Ramdas had tolerated all sorts of grief for his sake. He paid back an extra 100 rupees with the intent to cure Ramdas of his attachment to money for good, because it was an obstruction in his attaining the ultimate pushti reward and was disturbing his mood of servitude. So Sri Thakurji repaid the loan and Ramdas could stay at home. Sri Thakurji paid the small amount of 100 rupees, more than necessary in order to test Ramdas's attitude, to settle the further loan he had taken from even another moneylender, and just the few rupees left over was for expenses. Part 1 continued. On one day, a Vaishnava came to call Ramdas over, and Ramdas went with him. They happened to pass that moneylender's house on the street. Thinking that he might ask for his money back, Ramdas tried to walk past without being seen. However, the businessman saw him and realized he was trying to slip past, so he thought to himself that he must have pressurized Ramdas too much. The moneylender came in front of Ramdasji and fell at his feet. He said, "It is a pity that you no longer want to borrow money from me, but you must please take back the extra 100 rupees you paid me." Ramdas said he would come back in a little while, when he had finished doing what he was doing. Then, after he had dealt with some issues for the other Vaishnava, he went back to that shop. He realized that Sri Thakurji must have paid the loan back, and so he asked the shopkeeper to show him the signature. The moneylender said, "See, you have written this with your own hand. You gave me back the full amount of the loan, plus an extra 100 rupees. Ramdas saw the signature that Sri Thakurji had signed in his name. He became silent and then went home. At that moment he decided that he must go out of the house to do some form of paid work. Bhav Prakash. He reasoned that by staying at home and still eating from that wealth, he was making Sri Thakurji apply extra effort to his welfare. Ramdas's wife's love for the Lord was ordinary, and so she saw nothing wrong in it, so she would still accept it. Part 1 continued. Ramdas bought a horse and a rifle and worked in Prayag as a policeman. Whereas before he would only drink water or take the pan prasad when he was in a state of bathed purity in aparas, now he began to have them without bathing. Bhav Prakash. Ramdas still retained some egotistical pride about his state of purity, thinking he was the best behaved. Therefore, Sri Thakurji decided to obliterate that. What was the point of keeping such rules of aparas when it caused Sri Thakurji to suffer extra effort? Part 1 continued. Once Ramdas travelled from Prayag to Adel to visit Sri Mahaprabhuji. He was still dressed up in his official work clothes and carrying his gun when they met, and Ramdas prostrated before him. When Sri Mahaprabhuji praised his blessedness, the other Vaishnavas there asked why he was so blessed. He doesn't keep his state of aparas anymore, and he goes round with the policeman carrying a gun. Sri Acharyaji said, he is so blessed, he never makes Sri Thakurji tired through effort, and he has incomparable patience. Bhav Prakash. The consideration here is that Sri Acharyaji praised Ramdas for several reasons. By keeping very strict rules of purity, is one able to achieve anything? The path of grace is hard to tread. Ramdas lost his financial stability, then he got into debt, but he kept his heart focused on the Lord and never lost his patience and tolerance. Sri Thakurji himself paid off his debt. Even then he was not happy. He went to seek employment, and then he had to embrace humility, but he was never distracted from his remembrance of the Lord. This is why Sri Acharyaji praised him. Aaj ke Anand ki jai ho. So we'll rest from part 20 today. Jai Shri Krishna. Shri Vallabhadisha ki jai. Shri Govardhanath ki jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Shri Radhe. Tomorrow will be the 21st part. Jai ho.